I am the founder and president of Women of Color in Pharma. I would like to welcome you to today's panel discussion. It's long awaited. And before I get started, just wanted to say a couple of things for those of you who may not be familiar with Women of Color in Pharma. We started this organization in 2015. You see to the right of this slide the 9 founding members who started the organization. Our vision is that we would come together as women of color in pharma and really transform the pharmaceutical landscape for these women. Our mission is to empower women of color in pharma to excel in their personal and professional development so that they may have roles of impact and be able to make decisions along the way. Our ambition is really to work with these women so that we can enhance their visibility, their work, their aspirations, and their professional and personal needs. Our reach is about 3,000. If you look at our network in totality, we have sponsor companies who support us annually, and at our annual gatherings, we have about 400 to 450 in attendance. We formally launched at our first conference in 2017, and since that time, we have seen a significant movement of women in our network to higher positions within not only our organization, but also within their companies. We also offer coaching to all of our members, so I would encourage those on the phone who are looking to grow personally and professionally to really join us and become a member. All of the information is available on our website, which is WOCIP.org. During this pandemic, we have done several panel discussions like the one today to help our members and those in our network really get a handle on not only the virus, what the virus is, how the virus might impact us, but also other issues that have come and challenges that have come along with this virus, as well as other opportunities that exist. So I'm just going to thumb through a few of the things that we've done just so that you can see the variety of programming that we put forth and understand a little bit about the organization and what we're all about. We took advantage of a movie, Self-Made, that was on Netflix to take some time and really talk about the critical issues in that panel. So that's what you see here. We are offering virtual workouts on our Facebook group WOSUP Fit. So we would ask you to join us. Not only are there workouts there, but we're talking about nutrition, also daily motivation, and soon we will kick off challenges. We had a virtual vision board party, which was well received and allowed us to be forward thinking. And we also, for members only, are in the midst of our Build Your Brand series, and we have the last session in May. So there's still time for you to join so that you can be a part of that event. So now I'm going to turn over to our moderator for today's panel discussion, Delvin Burton. Delvin?
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on when you are viewing this particular panel discussion. Again, my name is Delvin Burton, and I happen to have the fortunate opportunity to be married to Dr. Charlotte Jones Burton, who tapped me to moderate this particular panel and bring my skills as an educator and background to this particular discussion. So just really briefly, in terms of my credentials, over 20 years in education, I've had the opportunity to serve as a classroom teacher, school administrator, and professional developer. So variety of experiences, and I'm looking forward to facilitating this particular panel today. And just really want to say thank you to Charlotte and WOSUP overall, because it is really an honor and a privilege anytime I think we as educators have the opportunity to talk beyond ourselves and really provide our insight and information to a larger audience. In this case, I'm hoping that the majority of the individuals who are here, in addition to wanting to expand their knowledge base, are really parents who are looking for tools, assistance, support as they continue to support their children in online experiences that we've sort of been forced into as a result of this COVID situation. So without further ado, I am going to have each one of the panelists introduce themselves. They are going to take, oh, I forgot. That's right. We have to go through the objectives. Thank you, Charlotte. So objectives, what we actually want to accomplish during the course of this call. So listed on the screen are 4 bullets. And I think what is key when it comes to these particular objectives and that I want to really point out is that we try to make them as actionable as possible. So it is really important to us that, you know, and you'll see questions, look for strategies that you are walking away with some concrete tools that you can use, again, to support your child during this online learning experience. And you're going to see us sort of flip between different terminology when it comes to what children and families are experiencing right now. It may be called online learning. We may use distance learning, but we are talking about the same thing in terms of those terms. So in addition to questions that you could potentially pose to your child about their particular experience online, look for us. What should you be paying attention to when you are observing your child and or their teacher during distance learning experiences? And then what do you need to set up in your home that really supports your child being able to learn? And establishing an environment could be anything from what needs to be surrounding them to what's the context in which they are learning at that particular point in time. What's the day look like? What point in the day are we at? What makes sense? You know, is it starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and going through the regular routine as if it was school, or are you stretching into the evenings based on your family dynamics? And then finally, it is really important to us that you also really have increased understanding. So there is some hope around you all as attendees, really walking away with knowledge and information that ultimately then allows you to be able to act accordingly in terms of either your family or in conjunction with the district and or schools that your children are a part of. All right. Now I think it's time to go to the panelists. There we go. So I have the pleasure of being joined on this call by a group of distinguished panelists. We have superintendents, we have classroom teachers and educators, we have homeschool professionals, and then we also have individuals who have state experience as well. So quite a diverse panel that I think will bring the expertise and information that you need as attendees to really be able to, again, act on the home front in a way that empowers you and your family members. So with that being said, I'm going to have each one of the panelists introduce themselves. And in addition to introducing themselves, they're going to give a few opening remarks in relation to this particular topic. I'm sure that the remarks, and we've given them the flexibility of taking the lens that they believe they are able to speak the best from when it comes to this particular situation that we are currently in terms of, again, supporting your child in their learning during this pandemic. So with that, let's start with Karima Akila. Karima?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm going to follow that protocol. I'm so grateful to join you today. Thank you, Charlotte, for this invitation. My name is Karima Akila. I am a previous public school teacher turned homeschool, unschool mom of 6 kids, and I've been homeschooling for the past 17 plus years. I am also the founder of the Genius School, a decentralized, democratic, self-directed school. I first want to offer my condolences to anyone during this time that has lost a loved one due to COVID-19. I also want to acknowledge the teachers and the administrators who are doing their very best to continue to serve their students. I am here to provide the perspective from a homeschool mom. I also want to make very clear that right now, this is called survival school. This is called Corona school. This is not homeschool. Even I, as a traditional homeschool parent, am suffering the loss of engagement with other children and the ability to go to the library. So right now, we are all surviving. So I'm here to offer that perspective from a traditional homeschooler to parents who are now Corona schooling at home. And then finally, as the founder of a decentralized learning school, to also provide a different opportunity for us to consider exactly what's possible when we think out of the box. So I'm very excited to join all of you this morning.
Thank you, Karima. Ebony.
Good morning. My name is Ebony Demendez. Also over 20 years in education. Currently, I serve as the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in West Orange, a position I've held over my career for over 13 years. Also wanted to just begin with condolences to our families who have lost loved ones and those who are still battling with the virus and recovering and required support at home from the schools and the community as we go through this together. And that includes our teachers who are also suffering losses, right? Our communication point in West Orange is relationship over rigor. We saw that somewhere on a tweet and we've made it our tag. And I think we're approaching this time that way, relationship over rigor. We know that we are the primary ones who are responsible for educating students on the school front as parents are at home, right? But some of these roles have now reversed and our parents are very much trying to keep up with all of the demands of education with our district, with our staff, our leadership. We're trying to be very mindful to make all of our decisions based off of our relationships with our families, understanding the unique situations that they're finding themselves in, making sure that our guidance and protocols and our approach to e-learning, as we call it, is with that in mind. From really how we're structuring our e-learning experiences to how we're redirecting our grading policies and how we're just trying to be very mindful of the needs and very mindful of what's actually taking place. So I'm glad to be here today. Hope to answer some questions and maybe provide some strategies that we're using that are proving to be effective in our district. Thank you, Charlotte and Delvin, for having me.
Thank you, Ebony. Let's go to Tanya Breland. Tanya, you might be on mute.
There we go. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. I am Tanya Breland, and I work for the Department of Education in the state of New Jersey. I lead the Office of Professional Learning. I have been a teacher. I've also been a principal, and I've also owned my own business providing professional development to teachers and administrators across the state of New Jersey. I have two children who are adults. They're 24 and 27 years old, the youngest of whom came home to shelter in place with us during this pandemic. Like the panelists before me, I too think about and pray often for families who have lost loved ones and or who are fighting this disease. I know a number of people who have lost the battle. And so as we continue through this pandemic together, we're here to support you in whatever ways that we can. I also want to acknowledge parents who are home juggling between being parents and being professionals and really trying to do all that they need to do for their children. Here in New Jersey, we are really doing the best that we can to try to ensure that all of our students' needs are met. Unfortunately, as a result of this pandemic, we have seen come to light a lot of inequities in communities across the state of New Jersey, and I know also across the country because I've been reading about it as well. And so some of the challenges we see here are also being faced all over the country. But we wanted to try to make sure here in New Jersey that our students are still being fed and that we provide childcare for essential workers. And we're also partnering with our local public television for our most vulnerable population of students and providing instruction, classroom instruction for an hour each day for every grade level on our local public television station, so that students who may not have access to computers and devices have an opportunity to watch instruction at home on their local public television station. I'm very grateful to be here and for this opportunity to share with all of you today.
Thank you, Tanya. And now Dr. Penelope Martin Knox.
So greetings to all. I bring greetings from South Carolina. My name is Penelope Martin Knox. and I am the proud superintendent of Sumter School District. I have over 25 years of experience in educating our children from the standpoint of being a teacher, a school-based administrator, district level administrator, and now currently serving as a superintendent. And let me preface by saying thank you, Dr. and Mr. Burton, for providing this opportunity for us to really engage our community around what it is that we can do to best support our children. When we talk about educating the whole child here in South Carolina and Sumter specifically, we've been really looking at educating the whole child, but the whole community as well. During these unprecedented times, as we navigate through this pandemic, it is all new learning for us all. So the best way we can support one another is to collaborate in efforts such as this. So while we are ensuring that our children are being educated, we are making sure that, as I've indicated previously, that we're making sure we hone in on the whole child while providing adequate food and meal preparation for our children and serving them so that they are nutrition through their daily academic experiences. But we're also making sure that our teachers and our school-based administrators are supported through this unprecedented time as well. Understanding that our parents aren't in this alone, that we have to work collectively and collaboratively to get through this, and we will get through this. So let's continue to galvanize around one another and provide those supports, because this is all new learning for us all. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I extend my condolences and my blessings to all who are experiencing turmoil around this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Penelope. And last but not least, we have Monica Rogers. Monica.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Monica Rogers, and I am a 24-year veteran in elementary education. I currently serve as a Title I support math and reading teacher, and I am just listening to everyone talk and feeling a little bit overwhelmed at the type of group that I have, that I'm a part of, and I feel honored to be a part of this group. I look at myself and think that I am representing the soldiers. You guys are the leaders and we're the soldiers who are trying to get this job done with this unprecedented time. And I believe as a teacher, I'm a bridge between the families and administration, and I hope that we're all able to work together well. I think, again, this is a once in a lifetime occurrence. I don't think anybody can even put into words what we're going through sufficiently. I know that we all miss the children, we miss our friends, we would miss working together. And I think that brings to mind for me that when we do get back to something that looks somewhat normal, I truly believe that the children are going to appreciate being in the classroom even more, because, you know, being away lets you see, I guess, absent makes the heart grow fonder. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into some questions. We have some prepared questions that we are going to utilize, but I would encourage those of you all who are attending this panel discussion, please feel free to use the chat, populate it with your questions. You can also use it to comment as you hear things that are being shared from our panelists. You may have that amen moment, right? Something that is stated resonates with you. Feel free to use that chat for confirmation as well, if it's, again, something that you hear that resonates with you. So what I want to do is I want to start off first. We're going to kind of move around. There will be questions that are what I kind of call more global in nature, that we may have those of our panelists who have some experience at the district and state level respond to. And then there will be some other questions that are very specific and strategic, and what's happening directly with your child, strategies that you need to be using in your particular home. And granted, I think all of the panelists can speak to that, but there may be moments where Karima, with her experience as a homeschool professional, and then Monica, definitely as someone who's working directly in classrooms right now, may be able to speak to that as well. So you'll see a variety of voices and have a variety of voices, and we'll make room for the panelists to weigh in as they see fit. So to kick us off, let's start with this particular question. And I think it's been mentioned that I think, Ebony, in your particular response or opening remarks, you started down the road of talking a little bit about supports and guidance that you all are giving to teachers to really support this shift in instructional delivery, right? Like this is not what school traditionally looks like for most people, right? Parents didn't necessarily sign up this particular mode of education. So it's something that we recognize that we've been forced into. But At the same time, we know that our educational institutions, both at the state level as well as at the district level, have really started to marshal to try to make sure that teachers have what they need to support instructional delivery in this particular space. So I'm actually going to toss this question out to both you, and then we'll have Dr. Knox weigh in, Martin Knox weigh in as well, with regards to, again, the supports that you all are putting in place to really support teachers at this particular time to make sure that students have what they need instructionally in classrooms.
Sure. I think that, as one of our panelists said, our teachers are our soldiers. They're the ones who are really engaging students, creating innovative ways to do so, reaching out to our students, speaking with them, trying to encourage them and motivate them. I think that our teachers are not only providing academic assignments, right, but for the students who are needing structure, who are needing to know that there's an individual, a live person, someone that they're familiar with and that they trust on the other side of that assignment. And that those relationships are really guiding the students' motivation and ability to achieve this and to positively or successfully get through the e-learning. From a district perspective, things that we've done is, number one, I want to think our communication has increased dramatically and consistently. So we are putting out our communications and very clear guidances to our teachers to help them move through the e-learning experience so that everybody knows what the expectations are and what the feedback loops are. Second, we have an instructional technology team of 40 plus members that we put in place, and we've set up support help desks at each school. So we have 2 to 3 technology instructional support people who are dedicated to each school or to grade spans, where the teachers can call upon them, join a hangout meet, get tutorials from them, get professional development online for very specific things that we're doing. So for example, if we're rolling out Google Meet, then we'll have screencastifys, we'll have videos, we'll have tutorials, and then they'll have people that they can go to specifically to help with those assignments. Also, we're allowing them to work in collaboration. So if one teacher's strength is to a certain content or to the technology, then they have great flexibility to work within their teams and their groups. Also, just being very mindful that our teachers too have children at home, and they're working, it's a home work-life balance that they're also trying to manage. So we're encouraging our teachers to really stick to their school day and respond to parents and to students within that time, and to try to, as best as they can, separate the time that they need for their families. We find that some of our teachers will write in and they're responding to their students, late into the day or over the weekend. And we honor that. We know they want to be there for our children, and we also want to honor their own families as they're also homeschooling and juggling. So just helping them with strategies on how to manage their time at home, and making sure that our schedule is not requiring of them more than, let's say, a 3-hour of office hours or instructional periods where they're taken away from the needs that they have at home.
Thank you, Ebony. Dr. Martin Knox, anything to add on that front?
Well, I think those are very good points that were touched upon. Ever since the beginning of this pandemic, shall I say, we've just been making adjustments throughout. And the adjustments have been made just based on listening to what our stakeholders and our constituents are saying to us, listening and observing our teachers, and just reminding people, just because the doors of the schoolhouse is closed, learning doesn't stop. We are still engaging our children, and here in Sumter, we're calling it an alternative pathway to learning. And so when we began initially just listening to our parents and listening to our students who actually reached out just to share with us, this is just overwhelming. We had to come up with an idea of how can we streamline the schedule, because the schedule that we actually operate from during the normal school day is not something that can transition to a virtual world. And so we had to streamline our schedules to provide consistency, to say that at least 90 minutes a day and then structuring Monday through Friday to say Mondays we would engage in mathematics across the district. On Tuesdays we would engage in English language arts. And there should be 90 minutes worth of instruction each day. Because initially when we began, we realized that teachers were really planning 2 and 3 lessons per day, which meant that kids were engaged in learning probably about 10 to 11 hours, which was also increasing the level of frustration, not just for our kids, but for our parents and our teachers in planning as well. So when we streamline the schedule, shall I say, that's one of the best things. It's just to make sure that there's consistency with the schedule, because when we talk about predictability, when we have the unpredictability, it actually leads to the mental health and the instability of our children and our teachers as well. So we needed to stabilize the learning environment because this was all new for many of our students and our teachers. While we were a district that engaged in one-to-one, the professional development that was necessary for our teachers to just take this on, and let me just be clear, the announcement was made that we were going to close schools on a Saturday, Sunday, and we jumped right in on Monday. So the providing them with that ample opportunity to begin to plan, to say, what will this look like? To be truthful and honest, we didn't have that opportunity. So we had to be patient to make sure that we understood that everybody was navigating this unnormal time, just making sure we were supportive of one another. So our teachers are engaging with their principals each and every day through Zoom, through Google Hangouts, through whatever platform they choose to use to collaborate. And then we also meet with our principals. Yesterday, I actually had the fortunate opportunity to meet with a group of teachers who were planning, but they were planning around one another. So one of the things that we can't forget while we're going through this is while we are educating our children, we also have to understand that our teachers who are providing that education also are educating their own children, are navigating through some unnormal circumstances. While we are talking about teachers, I also have to add the piece about our paraprofessionals, because in the mix of this, we have students who have varying educational needs. So the concern that we have also is not just educating all of our children, but particularly providing services to our students with special needs. How can you provide that one-to-one service for a student who needs speech support or who has auditory needs or occupational needs? So just making sure we're continuing to provide creative and innovative ways to provide students with what they need, because those students who have gaps in their learning right now, when we talk about the summer slide is a good thing that we are aware of, but now we're trying to figure out how we're going to deal with what I'm now calling the corona slide. And it is not a bad step. It is something that we are going to have to work diligently to make sure we accelerate opportunities for our children moving into the summer, but also looking forward to next year. So while we're in the midst of everything occurring now, we also have to plan for next year and determining what that may look like. Are we going to return to school in the beginning of the year, or will we begin with the virtual aspect? So we're really looking at utilizing the devices and the virtual experiences to try and play catch up or to accelerate using that virtual platform for our children. I also want to take the opportunity to say, while we're talking about our teachers, we also have other support staff that we need to focus in on, because we have facilities persons in our building, making sure the buildings are disinfected, making sure that our food services staff is supported while they're providing meals to our students each and every day. And just making sure that we, again, are galvanizing around one another to provide that additional support. So while we are continuing to educate ourselves each and every day and learning from one another, we are utilizing all the platforms we possibly can to make sure we're socially distancing ourselves, but also making sure we're safe in doing this work. Because the last thing we want is to make sure that someone becomes ill by trying to get them to deliver a service and exposing themselves to the unknown. So we're continuing to work diligently, and first and foremost is through communication and just listening and making adjustments. So if I say to you, we are where we were in the very beginning, we're not. We've actually grown, and we continue to improve and make it changes and adjustments so that we can continue to stabilize what our students experience each and every day.
Thank you, Dr. Knox. Martin Knox, excuse me. So with that, want to shift and really, and I've been watching the chat, and I know for many folks who are at home, the questions come up around, look, I'm doing the best I can to try to make sure that I have a routine for my child, but this is difficult and challenging. So really want to turn to Karima and Monica and really just see what suggestions you all may have for, I think first really helping a parent establish the home environment, right? What does it need to look like And what do you think is critical to be in place to make sure that a supportive learning environment is taking place for a child at home? Karima.
First of all, I just have to say, breathe. Just breathe. Take a deep breath. Exhale. It is going to be okay. It's going to be all right. This is something, as we all have said before, that we've never seen before. So give yourself some grace. Parents, teachers, administrators, give everybody needs a huge blanket of grace. It's going to be okay. That being said, there's also a component of realism that we have to address as well. One of the attendees asked the question, how can she provide a good learning experience for her, e-learning experience for her children when you have multiple children? And as the mom of 6 kids, I can definitely relate to that. So in this particular circumstance, when you have multiple kids and they all need to be on the device, number one. Number two, you have to work from home. And then there is the stretch of the bandwidth of the internet that creates an unrealistic expectation. And that unrealistic expectation leads to frustration. So I say, breathe. I say also, be realistic. Look at your family dynamic. Look at what it is that you have and do the very best that you can with what you have. I would say to parents during this survival school time or this Corona school time, communicate that to the teachers of your students and tell them, just be straight up, because the teachers themselves, as we have mentioned before, are also trying to school their own kids as well as continue to provide excellent education to yours. So tell them, listen, I only have 2 devices and I have 4 kids and I need to work as well. So we need to create some type of a routine that allows us to rotate when something is viewed and then when something is turned in. And then, if possible, create that expectation. The other thing that I would say is, for me, I have found in my experience that a routine is better than a schedule. I made the mistake when I first began homeschooling, leaving the public school environment, coming to home with my children. I created school at home. Now, while that sounds nice and while that works in a school, that schedule and that expectation did not work in the home. Because you have, especially if you have young children, you have the baby waking up from a nap when they weren't supposed to. You have the dog that got let out of the yard. You have FedEx delivering something to the door. Something is in the kitchen burning on the stove. And so you're trying to juggle all of that and provide instruction in the way that we are all, trained up in the way it should be, right? In school. I had to quickly abandon the idea of a rigid schedule. 9:30 to 10:15 was math. 10:25 to 11, that didn't work. What did work, however, was a routine, was following the natural ebb and flow of a family. And especially right now, when parents are stressed, kids are stressed, people are scared, this is traumatic. And during this time of trauma, what really can be learned, especially if a child is coming from a situation where there's a loved one, a grandparent or a cousin or someone that is either battling COVID-19 right now or has succumbed. So, and I know that teachers and admins know that. So to the parents, I would say, be realistic, number one, breathe above all, number two, communicate with your teachers what you need to do in your home in order to maintain your sanity, in order to maintain peace. And then talk to the kids. Have the kids, especially if they're old enough, have them lead the way as far as what that routine might look like. They might want to, if they can, sleep in a little late and then work later into the evening, depending on what the expectation is for assignments to be turned back in. And again, I really must blanket my part of the conversation by saying that as a traditional homeschooler who has signed the waiver saying that I take on full responsibility for the education of my children, that looks completely different than what parents are experiencing right now. I have parents calling me saying, well, how can I do what you're doing? And I say, until you sign that declaration of intent to homeschool, right now you are doing the very best that you can to support the classroom teacher while your child is still enrolled in public school. So I really want to be clear with that distinction, because I don't want people to think that this Corona time or survival school is what homeschooling looks like. It is not. Because like I said at the top of the statement, my children are suffering right now, missing out from not going to libraries, not going to co-ops, not meeting up with other homeschool children, and having that socialization and the enriching activities that they experience as well.
I would like to echo.
Monica, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Monica.
That's okay. I just wanted to echo what was previously stated, and then just to also say that, you know, this is a response to a pandemic. This is not a normal situation at all. So like she said, you cannot look at it as, well, now I'm going to be a homeschool instructor. That's not how it's going to work. I would also like to echo on the routine, waking up, getting dressed, trying to do things as normal as possible. One little suggestion that we would even give throughout the school year would be to have a homework station where you have supplies and things already there, and keep that space saved for that, so that you can actually have time where you detach from school. Make sure that the children even have times of being quiet or being alone, because everybody's crammed together all the time, and I think they might get frustrated just being together all the time. There's a little bit too much of that at the moment. I would also suggest that if you get overloaded, take a break. There's nothing wrong with that. I loved how it was mentioned to breathe. There's nothing wrong with taking breaks, and in the regular classroom, there are what we call brain breaks, where you just kind of let yourself go. I would also encourage families to put on the lens of having teachable moments where you're just doing things like cooking together, or going on a family field trip where you go for a hike to the park or things like that. So, you know, there's lots of things that I think parents already do that they need to be encouraged to continue to do, and that will let them feel a little bit less stressed, because we're all, again, responding to a once-in-a-lifetime situation.
Thank you, Monica and Karima, for that. I've often said that we as parents have to remember that we were our child's first teacher, and the experiences that we often created when they were, you know, smaller, younger children, to help them prepare for school. And although they may be in school now, we still need to really think about what was that mentality and mindset that we had that really allowed us to, again, kind of flourish in making sure that they were ready for school. And so some of the things that I think that you all have talked about, especially some of those last ones around, you know, what is that family field trip or that family excursion potentially look like? What questions can you pose to your child along the way as you walk through the park, or even if you're just walking around the neighborhood? Using those teachable moments to not necessarily try to impart content, but to get a child to think, right? What questions can you pose to them? It's not about whether it's right or wrong. It's about getting them to think in that particular moment. And that particular practice in itself continues to sharpen and get them prepared and aligned with what they need to be doing as any school-age child would need to do. So want to take this opportunity to shift and start to drill down a little bit, because one of the things that we recognize is that school children are not a monolith, right? Like, you cannot necessarily treat at home or online learning for the primary student, that child who's in, you know, kindergarten through third grade, the same way that you would for the child who is in high school. So let's take sort of a little walk through what suggestions you all may have for the parent of that primary or elementary school student, and then move to middle school and then to high school. And so for the primary or elementary school student and supporting their particular learning routine, Karima, and I'm going to bring Tanya into the conversation as well on that end. What 2 to 3 suggestions would you have for parents of those primary or elementary school students and supporting their learning online?
This is my favorite part of the whole entire conversation. And you really primed it perfectly when you were talking about using everyday experiences. I mean, this is where I hang my hat. This is the world that I live in. So number one, understand that you, like you said, Delvin, parents, you are your child's first teacher. You were there when they were born. You were there when they said their first word, when they walked for the first time. You were there when they identified colors and shapes. So all of that they learned as you spoke to them, as you lived life. So number one, during this time for parents of the young ones, I love those little itty bitties. Those are my favorite ones. Older ones are good too, but those younger ones, oh, they just get my heart. So number one, understand that you can just live your life and you can expose your children to everything that they would see and be exposed to in the curriculum. The idea to have in mind, it really is a radical thought, at least it was for me. It kind of shook me at my core, and it took me a minute to really relax into, and that is the thought that cooking is to teaching as learning is to eating, and understanding that the eating happens inside of the eater and the learning happens inside of the learner. So the very best thing that I can do as a chef or as a mom preparing meals for my children is to ask them, what is it that you would like to eat? Because I've made plenty of meals and gone to the store, prepped the food, stood over the hot stove and cooked it, and those lovely people didn't eat not one bite. Instead, when I start with them and I say, okay, guys, listen, I'm going to the store. What is it? Or better yet, they come to the store with me and do their own shopping. Amen, somebody. What is it that you guys would like? And then they tell me their favorite. And then we go get it. And then sometimes we prepare it together in the kitchen. And then I don't have to force anybody to eat anything that is their favorite. They get to gobble it up. And here's the best part. They eat it when they're hungry. So now if you could take that same analogy in terms of food and eating and cooking and apply that to learning and understand that as the learner, it is their job to learn. It is simply my job as a mom, as a teacher, to help that learning, to make it easy. So for the parents of young ones, understand you are the first teacher, number one. And then secondly, understand that all of that beautiful process happens inside of the learner. And the very best and most precious gift that you can give them is the gift of freedom, is the gift of curiosity, and to fan the flames of that curiosity. And especially during this time of online learning, to balance that out a bit. When they're done sitting in front of the screen with their fabulous teachers who are pouring their hearts into those kids, take a break from that style of learning and then just look around. Look around your house. When you are sitting there and you're planning a recipe or you're planning your budget or you are listening to the news or whatever it is that you're doing, talk out loud to the kids and observe. Watch. What types of things do the young ones gravitate towards? What do they talk about? Lean into that and find their genius, find their gift. What types of things have your kids done outside of the school time that lights them up on the inside? And meet them right there. Develop the relationship. I heard someone mention that is the relationship that is important as well as the instruction. So that would be my advice for primary parents. You're their first teacher. Find something that lights them up on the inside and fan the flames of that, and spark that curiosity that's already there, feed it, and then understand that cooking is to teaching as learning is to eating. It all happens inside of the learner, and so you should start with the learner.
Thank you, Karima. Tanya.
Yeah, Karima, that was great. I really appreciated that analogy. I love that analogy. I was actually going to share something similar, but since you said it so well, I can kind of talk about another piece of this. The social emotional well-being of your young student, your young child at home is really important, and paying attention to their behavior. So these are very different times. I call this more like emergency schooling. This is not typical, and just like they said for you to give yourself a break, I totally wholeheartedly agree. Your students do not, your children do not need long hours of instruction when they are being schooled at home, and making sure that they're active, but paying attention to their conduct and their behavior. So the younger students don't necessarily have the vocabulary to be able to articulate, I'm frustrated with this process, or I'm anxious here. So they'll act out instead. So if you see that your child is behaving in ways that may not be typical for them, that's a sign that there's something else going on with them. And I would recommend that you stop and pay attention to what their needs are in that moment, because that's something that they may not be able to express to you in words that articulate what's actually happening. But the truth is, this is not normal, and they know it's not normal. They know that, you know, it's not like a Saturday where they get to play and have a good time all day and do fun things. Every day is like another Saturday, but with mom home, dad home, or grandparent home and child home. And, you know, but it doesn't actually look like that anymore, because parents are being required to work from home as well. And or there may be children who are needing to go into childcare situations because you are an essential worker and you can't be home with your child. That too can be also very frustrating. So pay attention to your child's cues and their emotional well-being, and make sure that you attend to those needs. Another thing that I think would be, in addition to communicating with your child's classroom teacher, connect with other parents. Are there ways that you can divide and conquer when it comes to educating your child at home? Are there parents in your neighborhood who can get online at a certain time and provide some enrichment or some opportunities to support your children in areas that may not be your strength? So, I hear over and over again parents saying, I don't understand this new math. Well, there are parents out there who do understand the new math. Like, are there parents that you might be able to connect with who understand the new math or whatever it is that is being taught in the classrooms from home? There are ways that you can kind of, support one another through this process as you're supporting your children. So just keep those things in mind as you go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tanya. I just want to call out, and I know we're saving questions for the end, but I think it's a pointed question at this particular point in time. And Gwen, Charles, I really appreciate you posing the question about students who are easily distracted or overwhelmed, because sometimes that really sort of aligns with that primary student. And one of the things that I would just call out, and definitely any other panelists could potentially add in, for students who are easily distracted or in those particular cases, think about chunking and how long you actually have a student work, right?
Mm-hmm.
For us as adults, we often look through our lens, but we need to switch our lens to think about what the lens of the child is in that particular moment. So it may mean that particular child can only work in, or best works in 20 to 30 minute spurts, right? As opposed to saying, hey, I need you to sit down for the next hour and a half.
Right.
And I know in balancing that with the telephone calls that adults need to make, and my wife is queen of the conference call. Like, I get that, but in those particular moments, you may need to articulate to the others that you work with, hey, my child has special circumstances that I need to be able to address. I'm going to be really attentive and make sure that I'm present for sort of these particular spans, but I may need to take these extra breaks or step away for a moment. I'll catch up with the conversation. I think part of it is, and both on both sides, right? Being clear in terms of expectations with your child, what you're going to do to support them, but then also being very clear with the people who you work with. And Grace was mentioned earlier, and I think part of what we do is project what we think somebody is going to think about our situation, as opposed to really stating what we need to be successful. I think our colleagues and our supervisors want us to ultimately be successful in the work we're doing at home and at school. And sometimes it's just clear communication about what those circumstances are, so that you can get what you ultimately need to be successful on both fronts. Hey, articulating to Johnny, Dad's got this call, Mom's got this call. I just need 20 minutes. I want you to work on this for the next 20 minutes. See what you can do. We'll take a 5-minute break, or I'll take a 10-minute break, and then see where you are, and then we'll go back to it, right? But part of that is, again, clear communication, I think, on both sides, and really being very specific about, again, what that needs to look like on both fronts. So I don't know if anybody else on the panel would echo that, or if you have a different perspective when it comes to, again, working with children who are easily distracted or can become overwhelmed really easily, because that's sort of a reality, especially, again, at that primary age, for what parents may be dealing with. Anything that anybody wants to add on? Monica?
I wanted to echo with that. I know in my district, they have set up a routine where it's 3 days of new instruction, and then the last few days of the week are where you play catch up, so to speak. And if the kids haven't finished anything, that gives them time to get caught up. And another thing I'd like to mention is that as a resource teacher, I'm supporting the teachers as well as the students. And I have set up hangouts where it's just a homework hangout or a classwork hangout. And I will go into the regular self-contained room hangouts and tell the kids, if you're struggling with anything, and there's 16 kids in here, you can't get the attention you need, just hang out with me for a little bit and we'll get your work done together. And a few of the kids have come and they really like that one-on-one time. So I would encourage parents to ask their classroom teachers, is there another teacher that could help my student get through things? Because sometimes they just want somebody to sit with them to get through the assignment.
Yeah, thank you, Monica, for that. it was well said. So appreciate that. Let's talk about sort of that next level of student, and these are the kids who can be, in some cases, and I've been a middle school administrator and instructor, so I recognize the challenge sometimes that our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, in terms of traditional school model, bring to the table. I say it's the group that think they grown, but will quickly cry and exhibit their own level of frustration in a second. So, if I could, Monica, you had started us off and added a little bit on that last question.
Mm-hmm.
If you kick us off with just what additional suggestions you may have for those of us who have that middle school student at home, what should we be considering in terms of supporting their learning online?
Yes, again, with middle school, I agree. I made sure that I stayed in elementary because middle school can be pretty tough. I think that it's wise to monitor your children as often as you can when they are on the computer because, like you said, they do get easily distracted and off task. And then I would remind them, most of the schools have the children go through an online program where they are told to monitor their use as far as etiquette, how they speak to one another, and they actually have to sign a contract as to what their behavior should be when they're online, to keep in mind that there are behaviors that are just not appropriate, particularly when you're using school technology. So that would be sort of where I would keep my focus with the middle school kids. A lot of times there's issues with, side chats and things. So that would be where I would put my focus with my students.
Cool. Penelope, if you could add in here, just again, specific suggestions maybe for that middle school child.
Absolutely. I think that all of the information that has been provided by the panelists, while it was mentioned for the elementary level, I also think it's appropriate for the middle school level as well. The biggest challenge in middle school right now is, and I continue to hear us say the same thing, that parents are our first teachers, but through this, they are the first teachers, but they're not the only teachers because, again, we're working through this together. And so while we're going to the level of the wonderful middle school children, I don't care what you all say about them, they're the best little people you can ever find. And I know many of you are like, what's wrong with her? I love middle school. That's where my passion is. And so when we talk about the middle level learner, while they're also navigating through this whole uncertainty of the pandemic and why can't I go to school, the biggest piece for the middle level learner is, where do I belong? It's that socialization piece. And I do believe that that needs to continue. While we have to maintain social distancing, I would encourage our parents and our communities to provide time for our students to communicate with one another through Google Hangouts or through FaceTime with that monitored dialogue so that they're not losing themselves. When it comes down to the focus piece, I saw there was also a question about the child who's not focused or the boys who want to play on Xbox. There are so many opportunities out there for us to balance the routine. And I think the routine is the biggest component. If you lock them into a schedule, that's where they're going to begin to become distracted. And I think the point that you mentioned earlier, Mr. Burton, about chunking the information, I think it's even more important at this particular point in time. If we have students with an established routine, if you know that you have about 90 minutes of work to do, you don't have to use that 90 minutes all at one time. Give students the opportunity to have a brain break. And I mentioned it earlier about the flexibility, allowing children to establish a space within the house that is theirs. And when I say theirs, not that they have an outdoor apartment or something like that, but it is their space where they go and they learn and they can read and do some other things, because everything we're talking about right now is about what we do through the device. We can't lose that sense of those other routines that we've experienced over time with that hands-on, authentic opportunity to learn. Give them the opportunity to take what it is that they've learned online that particular day and determine how it benefits them or how it's applicable to their everyday life, because that's what learning is all about. When we talk about students really having ownership in their learning, if you give them that space and that opportunity in middle school with some monitoring, I guarantee you they'll feel a sense of independence and they'll want to work on their own. There are many resources out there where we can continue to give students those experiences so that they're not being bored. We have virtual field trips that they can take. We have the Smithsonian is offering free tours of many of the museums. Discovery is offering some virtual tours of some places, touring around the world, and just allowing students to write about what it is that they've experienced and how does this impact them as they are developing. But I would say that at this time in the middle level, just continuing to monitoring our children, because they are going through turmoil right now internally as they're going through puberty and that sense of belonging. And if they're not in school with their peers and socializing and navigating through this, they're going to have even more turmoil at the end, and that will definitely impact them. When we get into those ACEs or the adverse childhood experiences, we definitely don't want this to contribute to those, because we want to provide our students with as much normalcy as we possibly can, with minimizing the conflict that they may experience. And I would also add another suggestion. We are having a dialogue right now virtually. I would encourage our parents to set up a lunchtime where their students can eat lunch and talk to their peers, virtual perspective. I think that would help the partnership with the parents and to allow them to continue to keep those friendships and those relationships going, because we do know in the middle school, relationships do matter.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Penelope. I mean, I've heard about, we're wearing out Zoom for business purposes, but yeah, creating that virtual lunch break or that virtual lunchroom that gives kids the opportunity to share and connect with their peers. A great win, a quick win, if parents are not already doing that. If you want to become your child's hero for the day, do something like that for them in conjunction with some other parents, and I guarantee you will definitely be at the top of their list for a while. Ebony, and I've seen in the chat a few things related to seniors and working with high school students, especially around the expectations of finishing the school year out and getting ready for college, and sort of the turmoil that's been, that this pandemic has thrown that into. But suggestions for parents of high school students.
Sure. I think what was just mentioned, the idea of independence is something that we're really starting to see, right? In our curriculum, we teach toward independence. We attempt to develop independent learners. And now we're seeing why it is so critically important, not only for going out into real life and career work as we place that in our standards, but here for a time such as this, right? We need independence. And so then I think for our parents of our high schoolers to just be mindful and remember that what they may be also seeing is no longer the direct support that they're receiving from the teacher, and now there is an independent learner. So that student who would have normally gotten the straight A and gotten it all done, right, in school with the direct support of the teacher or with guidance from the teacher, is now having to do that independently at home. Someone said breathe, show some grace to the students and allow them to do the best that they can with the resources that they have, and that the projects or the assignments don't need to be submitted as with all of the direct support that they would have had in school, right? We're looking for engagement. We're looking for the students to attend to the content as best they can. If we're thinking about how to manage a schedule such as a student who has a lot of AP courses or a lot of honors courses, maybe, Delvin, you talked about chunking. I would also submit communicating to the teachers that the focus of the student will be on those courses, and maybe the electives would take a back seat. Communicate with the teachers, communicate with the school leadership, let them know what you can accomplish at home and where your focus will be. And I think that will be well received. Again, flexibility. We have parents who are saying we are able to focus on these major courses. We're going to need to, need flexibility with these electives or these other areas, and we are receiving that. We are now the collaborative or the cooperating teacher, right? The school teacher plus the parent. And so then just as in a classroom, both cooperating teachers would have say and give input to what that instruction would look like, we need to take that approach with our parents, you as the cooperating teacher, us as the cooperating teacher, and both be able to give input as to what we can accomplish together in that e-learning environment. Another suggestion might be to communicate to teachers, my student, my child, or the child communicate, because we're in high school, so the child should be advocating for self. I can complete this assignment and I will be able to hand it in over multiple days. So if this assignment is a long one, I'm not able to get it in this one sitting, I will be able to get this section in on a Monday, this section in on a Tuesday, this section in on a Wednesday, so that the teacher knows the child is working on it, because that's what we really want to know, and that they'll submit it. And in our district, we've made all assignments due by 11:59 p.m., not by the regular school day, because everyone's on a different schedule. Everyone is sharing devices. Parents are working at home, right? And so then it's due, they have the complete day to hand it in. And with that said, the end of the marking period for us, for example, is Monday. Any assignment is able to be handed in on that Monday by the end of the marking period. And teachers have the flexibility to go back and say, yes, this was due last week, but the student is handing it in now, and I will accept it. We are not, we are communicating and making it clear, again, relationship over rigor, flexibility. If the student handed in the assignment, accept it. It won't be marked late. We want to accept those assignments. We understand that there are different situations. Another thing we're doing is the Flex Friday. Someone mentioned that, the catch-up day, if you will. And so then that day is being used for students to catch up on assignments. Also for teachers to catch up on grading and feedback. The teachers, were asking them to give feedback to the students, motivational as well as on their assignments, so that this Flex Friday is being used so that both the teacher and the students can catch up on their assignments. The other thing I would encourage high school seniors to really think about is to push into the school counseling areas and push into the social and emotional areas that Tanya talked about. Our school counselors have set up many activities around mental health, around mindfulness, anxiety, fear, isolation. So tap into that, see what your district has, and know that everybody's online. So even if your district doesn't have it, those resources are probably public in another. And so then just, look and see what's out there, but ask your district, find out what is the school counseling department doing to offer all of these different activities, or parent resources to recognize when our own children are in crisis, when they may be depressed, when they are suffering with the trauma, and what they can do at home and who they can reach out to. We have crisis hotlines that are still active. We have school counselors that are doing youcanbookme.com. That's another thing that we're doing. So the students can go on, set up an appointment with a school counselor, and they'll walk them through some of those moments of crises. Parents, begin to have those conversations with your students, your seniors, around graduation and prom. That might not be traditional this year. So start to have those conversations and start to think about what that might look like for your child. It is going to be difficult. This is your senior year. Our seniors, wanted to celebrate their graduation, walk across that aisle, right? And prom and get dressed up and all of the things that they should celebrate. I think parents should start to have those conversations with their children to just make them aware that this may not be the traditional graduation and prom experience. I know that schools are looking to do them online. It will not be the same, but I think preparing their hearts for that conversation is important. Also, for college visits, not to lose sight of the application process, the FAFSA process, and the virtual school visits that are available. I know most colleges are offering virtual visits so they can go online and still visit the schools. They're also very aware of the situation and the grading policies. And so just communicate with the school to find out if they're still using the traditional grading policy, if they are moving to a pass-fail, and communicating with the colleges to find out what they will be accepting. We've seen communication for most of the colleges that they understand, of course, what this pandemic has brought us. And so then they will be accepting all of those grading systems that are within our high schools. But to continue to reach out and to continue moving forward virtually through those processes, and leaning on the school counselors to help your children with those. Lastly, I just want to communicate that there are many of our students who are finding difficulty with the e-learning and finding difficulty and need additional support. But there are also the students who are moving quickly through the curriculum, who are moving quickly to the 2 or 3 hours of instruction and are on the other end of that and need enrichment. So what enrichment opportunities are available through the e-learning that the school is providing? How have maybe schools opened up their gifted curriculum to all students, right? So that all students can kind of tap into the enrichment and the advanced learning opportunities that are out there, because some of our students are looking for more, right? So I just wanted to be mindful of both types of students, both types of learners, since we're talking about that everyone is not the same. And I think that would be some of the strategies that we would encourage our seniors.
Thank you, Ebony. We're going to open it up more broader. I've seen quite a few questions coming through the chat. So we're going to shift to questions from the audience. And I'm going to kind of try to monitor this as best as I can and pick 2 or 3 voices, 1 or 2 voices rather, to speak to a particular question. Before we do that, there were 2 things that came up in the chat. One is this notion around sort of these virtual take your child to work days, which I almost think is probably almost happening daily, right? Based on the dynamics of your family and where you are. One of the things that I would communicate to parents, one of the things that sort of frustrates me as an educator to hear is the apologies for children, right? I'm sorry for my child in the background for running around. Kids hear that and they pick up on that, and they think that they've essentially done something wrong in some of those moments when kids are just being kids. I would encourage you to sort of make that blanket statement in your work with your colleagues that, hey, my kids are at home. They may run around in the background. If they disrupt things or whatnot, I may need to step away for a second. But, those constant apologies that I hear sort of coming up for, again, kids being kids. And again, the message that we don't want to send is that they are doing something wrong. They're being themselves. And in many cases, they're curious. They want to see what you're doing. So see how you can bring them into the conversation or bring them into it, whether it's your lap or have them sit next to you at their desk. So, hey, mom or dad is doing their work. You're doing your work too. A lot of times they just want to be present and in your space and not be disruptive. So just something to consider in terms of how you actually frame for your colleagues and your peers what their presence actually means to you in those particular moments. Want to shift though, because one of the things that I saw come up is this whole notion of sort of the rigidity. It sounds like that some parents are feeling when, they have that instructor or someone who is not allowing them some of what we've talked about, that grace for an assignment or something of that nature, and wants to, hammer the accountability home and set a structure that may not necessarily be conducive for making sure that their child is successful for their particular circumstance, right? In those particular cases. So Tanya, want to bring you into the conversation at this particular point. And then, I'll go with Dr. Martin Knox as well, just in terms of weighing in when you do have situations where the teacher is not seeming to be as responsive as you ultimately need them to be. What recommendations you have, Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. Teachers are also under stress. And, many of them may be feeling the pressure of, I want to make sure my kids are succeeding and I don't want to let this pandemic get in the way of that. But what they're not seeing on the other side is what's happening in your various homes. They're not seeing the challenges that you as parents may be experiencing trying to balance everything. And so I think that finding ways to create open communication with the teacher, and if need be, pulling in other partners like the school principal that someone mentioned or other administration to support you in making sure that your child gets what they need, but also that there's flexibility in how they get what they need, keeping in mind that these are not normal circumstances. And so while a teacher may be trying to hold high expectations, I appreciate that. I think that's great. But there are ways to hold high expectations and be flexible at the same time. And so if you, assure the teacher that, look, I'm trying to work with you as a parent. I want my child to be successful too. Of course you do. All parents do. I don't know one parent who does not want their child to succeed. But sometimes we have to advocate for our kids in ways that we may not have previously had to do that. So this is new territory for everybody, for parents and for teachers and for administrators. And they really are struggling. Like, I support a group of principals that work with me, and I had a session with them, and they're struggling too. They're struggling to try to find the right balance, to try to help take care of sick family members and school their children at home and support their teachers in the school. So everyone is feeling the stress of all of this, and what isn't helpful is rigidity. So it's really important that you try to break down those walls by advocating for your child the best way that you know how, and then pulling in others to help you in that process if you're not getting the traction that you need. Because quite honestly, like, nobody really knows what they're doing here. We haven't done this before. Nobody has experience with this. So, you know, that teacher who's being really rigid, that it's because they might be scared. You know, they may have fear that they might not get it right, or that their kids might slip under, or that they're going to be looked at as a bad teacher if they don't do, you know, things the way that they would normally do them in the classroom. We've got to have more flexibility. The state has offered flexibility in the state of New Jersey, where we're not even evaluating teachers, you know. So it's like relax. Like, that's what I would say to the educators out there, like, relax. But then as parents, you know, push for what you need for your child.
Right.
Dr. Martin Knox.
I would actually agree with everything that was stated. When we talk about just understanding the world of Devin, you actually opened up so eloquently about the apologies of the children in the background. We have teachers, and I don't want to believe that teachers are just not being flexible. I think that looking into the reasoning why, because the same amount of children we have that possibly don't have access to wireless connectivity, be it because they are living in an area where the setting is just so rural, they don't have connectivity. I'm not going to make excuses, but I just want us to really look at there some other reasons for that rigidity, or what is perceived to be rigidity, or the lack of response. If they're living in a remote area, if they are experiencing sickness as well, or if their family members, immediate family members, have either passed from the COVID or are on ventilators, we just don't know what they're experiencing. So my recommendation would be, regardless as to the reason, is to reach out to the administrator, because they too may have an understanding of what may be occurring to provide you with that feedback. What I don't want us to do is to get into a place where we feel as though they are doing this intentionally. If there's some intentionality behind it, then the administrators will deal with it, but only if they're aware. We talk about it here in our school district very often, that Monday through Thursday, instruction will take place. But on Friday is a day for students to submit all makeup work, and teachers to plan and to provide adequate feedback to our children and to continue to move forward. So I will say that everyone is available to answer any question at any time. Even though we're working remotely, I think we're more accessible than what we would have been if we were in the physical school itself. So what I would encourage you to do is to reach out to the administrator and to continue to do what you're doing. You have to be your child's advocate. You have to be your child's support system. And I don't want anyone to apologize for being persistent, because that's what it's all about. It's about being persistent, but just really understanding what could be happening in that individual's home. When we're talking, I just looked at one of the comments in the chat box. There's some other things that we have talked about. And when we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about child protective services being involved in child abuse, all of those things have not stopped since we've experienced this pandemic. In fact, they probably have ramped up, and we won't know until we physically can see the adult or the child that's being exposed to it. So I just want us to be mindful of what could possibly be taking place in that home of that individual. And again, we keep talking about supporting one another, whether we see that someone is not being flexible or not being open and amenable to communicating with me. Either way, it's not acceptable. But there are ways in which we can work around it. There could be another teacher that's assuming the responsibility if there are some challenges there. But I would encourage you, has been mentioned, is to reach out to the administration.
the one other thing, and if I could just add a piece here, because we talk about advocacy sometimes, and I want to provide a suggestion for what advocacy could potentially look like, because sometimes advocacy is taken as, let me call and give some words to the administrator or the counselor or whoever's picking up the telephone. One of the things that I would suggest to parents who are on this call, on this panel discussion, think about proposals, right? What can you propose concretely to the administrator, to the teacher, that recognizes your circumstance, but still will get to the ultimate result of having your child finish that work or that project or whatever it is. You know your situation best. So for example, if you are balancing, having a lack of technology for the number of students or individuals who are in your house at that particular moment, putting forth that proposal where, hey, this is what we ultimately need. Here's what we will work towards, and let it reflect what is reasonable for you. That communication piece that has been emphasized throughout this call really goes both ways. Yes, you want people to communicate with you, but you also, as a parent, have to be proactive in communicating what the circumstance is. And for me, it's just offer up proposals that people can respond to. That lets me know that, one, somebody's being insightful about it as an educator, and then it's easy for me at that particular point to say yes, because I don't have to figure that piece out. They've already figured it out, and they just need me to sort of confirm that, hey, that particular proposal works for me as an instructor for that particular child or group of students. So one thing that you may want to be able to suggest. So the issue of equity has come up. Not a surprise on that end, given the audience, and this is definitely an area. I think, Lucretia, I've been trying to follow the chats with regards to sort of the equity questions, but are you able to pull out one specific question around equity or a general theme in regards to equity that we can bring forth into the conversation?
Like you, I see many questions surrounding equity. And I believe it's regarding the ability to be able to teach in all economic environments. Being said that some teachers are not using Zoom and other things because there are particular students who may not have internet access, or there's language issues. So kind of just speak on the inequality in what's happening right now with online learning, that it's not being done the same way across the board, and how that may affect a student when we do go back into the classroom.
Yeah, got it. So I'll open it up. Ebony, would you like to weigh in on this particular question?
Sure. I think I'd preface it by saying that here is where we see the equity gaps increasing. Here is where we see that they, for those who kind of passed them by and didn't acknowledge the great inequities that exist in our educational system. Here they are, front and center, and they're widening, right? And so as a district, I think we need to be, as school districts, we need to be extremely protective over our students and really see how we're going to address some of those inequities as best as we can in this virtual setting. I know that technology seems to be one of the major issues, right? Who has the technology, who doesn't? We've tried our best to deliver. We've delivered over 1,000, Chromebooks to homes and to students to make sure that our students have the technology that they need. And in the instances that they don't have the technology or the the access to internet, then we are doing the home copies, right? We do deliver them to the home. I know that that's something difficult for some districts, but we do put our packets on buses and we take them to the homes. We know who our students are that are struggling with technology, or worse, whose parents may be ill and they're taking care of themselves in a separate room in the house, right? So delivering food and things of the sort, making sure that there's a connection with an adult, and that we're being mindful of those students because I think the social economic factor plays a role there as well, right? Making sure that our parents know where to go to get food for their homes. I would think that our ELL learners are probably one of the biggest populations right now that are of great concern to us in terms of the language, how we are delivering instruction in native language. Some of the adjustments we've made for our ESL students is that normally they may take part in their instruction in their general education classroom, and now we've just moved them ELL only, and they're only responsible for the ELL instruction because it is overwhelming for them to take part in all of the instruction as we normally would in school. For those parents, we've identified teachers and a team of our bilingual staff who call the parents directly, find out what is the issue, what is your situation, and then we modify and adjust based on that circumstance. We cannot hold the same expectation in virtual learning for all of our students because it is very different. For our special education students, that looks very different as well. So we have a preschool for students who are disabled, and so there that looks very different. Our paraprofessionals are pushing into those meetings. Our paraprofessionals are pushing into the Google Meets with our teachers. We may have one-on-one instruction with those students. So to parents, what are the resources that are available in the district, and how might you need to communicate with your district and your leadership to say, here, this is my situation. This is what is very different and unique here, and I need the support in order to really help my child engage in the learning. Our struggling readers, our students who were already struggling before they left, and now we see that, again, that gap widens. So we have our academic interventionists that would normally push into a classroom. Now they're not pushing into the classroom. Now they're offering intervention to the students. Again, who are the students by name? Pushing into that. Yeah.
Let me have Karima weigh in real quick,
Sure.
just in terms of, we got a few minutes left in the conversation, and
Sure.
I know this is an area where Karima is also very passionate, and don't want to make the assumption that as an educator in homeschool that the issue of equity doesn't often come up for you to have to address as well. So give us some comments or thoughts in this particular area as well.
Sure, and I'll be very brief. It requires us to think outside of the box. Number one, take a long view instead of looking at what needs to happen for the rest of this school year or even next year. Have a long view approach in order to cover the needs of all students. Number two, is there a way for school districts and teachers to give the parents the objectives that the students would have gained via the online learning, and allow the students or the parents to find real life experiences for the kids to engage with those objectives? I wrote an app that allows self-directed learners to document that style of learning in my own home, where my children switched to that style of learning. When my husband was going through his chemotherapy treatments, I could not be here. So in many ways, my children during that time experienced the inequality that life presented, very much similar now to COVID-19. And so just to have an app that allows students to document what it is that they're able to feed themselves through everyday learning. I would also say, again, thinking outside of the box for those students that are ESL learners. If the instruction is missing because they do not have the technology for online learning, could it be suggested, again, thinking outside of the box, that they watch TV with the closed caption on in English, so that as they watch something and listen to something, they can also see the words? That's how my 9-year-old taught himself how to read. So it can be solved, but it will require us to use a different set of thinking instead of the same set of thinking that created the problem in the first place. But the bottom line is just look for real life experiences. If you don't have the technology, you don't have Zoom, you don't have smartphones, how can students, because all curriculum is just real life synthesized into little small pieces that allows teachers and students to meet it on an everyday basis. But real life presents the opportunities for the students to engage in those objectives as well. And everybody has an opportunity to engage in real life.
Yes, thank you, Karima. So true, so true. One of the things that we want to do and that we'll do in follow-up as we prepare to wrap up this conversation, just want to call out just a few key themes that have come up. One, and I think it is not said enough, that notion of breathe and relax, right? Breathe, relax, give yourself some grace. So that's one thing. Two, communication, right? Yes, you expect it from the school, but what can you do in terms of proactively communicating your circumstance? People are not, as much as we are in a situation where, you know, you hope that people would check in and doing the right things from that standpoint. It does not mean that people are not trying to do the best that they can, but you know what you need. So encourage you to proactively articulate what you need. And probably the third one that I will call out is that this is new for everybody. There is no template for this particular moment in time. I will say, fortunately, that a number of educational institutions, and it is forcing schools to look at what they are doing and what they would need to do in responding to these situations. So going forward, they will have templates, processes to be able to address something like a pandemic. But this is the ship is sort of being built, or the plane is being built as it's flying in this particular case. If you are a passenger in that plane, you know what you need to survive, right? So be proactive about articulating what you ultimately need to survive in these particular moments. We, as a part of follow-up to this particular conversation, I've asked the educators that are on this particular panel, as well as some other educators that I know, to bring and to send me resources. So we'll be issuing those out and sending that information out to you all. Some of it is very much in line with what Karima has talked about in terms of what can you do to provide independent learning experiences. And then there are other pieces to what Ebony talked about, like what are those mindfulness pieces? What are those things that really need to help you with regards to mindset and supporting your child in these difficult and challenging moments that, you know, we would hope that nobody would have to experience, but given that we are, how can we help to manage and not go into this crisis mode in those particular situations? So I do want to make sure that I give Madam President, my partner in crime, the opportunity to provide us with any closing comments or statements before we, you know, call it in the panel completely. So Charlotte.
Thank you. This has been a great discussion, and I feel that the parents that are on the line who are battling the duality of being the professional and the parent really did gain some sanity back by spending this morning with you all, really understanding that everyone is walking through a journey that we've never encountered before. And so hearing that from someone who's at the state level, hearing that from a superintendent and assistant superintendent, hearing it from a teacher, I think we can really believe it. So we've collected our data on that part. I also read in the chat, you know, people are saying that you've given them some hope in this situation because we as parents begin to feel out of control when we cannot control the things that we normally do. And so listening to you all, I think, has really helped that as well. And we will have others who will be listening in on the recording, and so your message will go broader. I want to turn my attention in maybe the last moment that I have to just let the parents know that as the professional, you have the opportunity to gain some control of your schedule. We've talked about flexible Fridays for the children. You also should have flexible Fridays. You have PTO, paid time off, that you can use strategically throughout the day so that you can bring some control to your sanity. You can block your calendars. Start now, look 2 weeks ahead, block your calendars, be strategic. That flexibility you should also think about for yourselves as well. That's what we're all about. And I will also remind you guys to collaborate, not only with your teachers, superintendents, and administrators at schools, but reach out to others within the organization. You've seen in the chat, maybe someone is going through something that you are also going through. So don't just let the conversation die here. Pick up the phone. We will get through this. And if you have any questions that you weren't able to get out, you can email them to Delvin. He's going to make himself available. Email him at info@wosup.org, and we'll make sure to get that information to him. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.